Picture this. You're scrolling through your phone at 11 p.m. You've already had a full day, work stress, family obligations, a million little decisions. And now here you are, getting into a heated argument with a stranger on the internet about something that happened 3,000 miles away, involving people you'll never meet, regarding a situation you can't influence, and honestly, barely understand. Sound familiar? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Right now, at this very moment, there are approximately 700 things happening in the world that people think you should have an opinion about. Celebrity scandals, political debates, corporate controversies, social movements, someone's parenting choices, another person's lifestyle, a movie you haven't seen, a book you haven't read, a scientific debate you don't have the expertise to understand. And somehow, we've convinced ourselves that having a take on all of it makes us informed, engaged citizens. But what if I told you that this endless opinion forming is actually destroying your peace of mind, damaging your relationships, and preventing you from focusing on what truly matters? Today, we're diving deep into one of the most counterintuitive pieces of ancient wisdom that's more relevant than ever. You don't need an opinion on everything. In fact, having fewer opinions might be the most liberating decision you ever make. I'm going to share with you why the ancient Stoics would look at our modern world and shake their heads at our desperate need to have hot takes on everything, how this opinion addiction is costing you more than you realize, and most importantly, how to break free from this exhausting cycle. But first, let me tell you about the moment that changed everything for me. It was a Tuesday evening and I was at dinner with friends. The conversation had drifted, as it always does, to the latest controversy dominating social media. I don't even remember what it was now. That's how insignificant most of these things turn out to be. But I remember the feeling, that familiar pressure building in my chest. Everyone was sharing their perspectives, their analysis, their righteous indignation or passionate defense. And I felt it. That voice in my head saying, "You need to contribute. You need to show you're informed. You need to prove you're on the right side of this." So I opened my mouth, ready to cobble together some half-formed thoughts based on a headline I'd skimmed and a few tweets I'd seen. But something made me pause. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was a rare moment of clarity. But I suddenly realized I had absolutely no idea what I was talking about. I hadn't researched this issue. I didn't understand the nuances. I had no direct experience with it. It didn't affect my life in any meaningful way. I had no power to influence the outcome. And honestly, I didn't actually care about it beyond the social pressure to have an opinion. So instead of launching into my usual performance, I said something that felt revolutionary. You know what? I haven't looked into this enough to have a thoughtful perspective. The table went quiet for a second. Then the conversation moved on. Nobody attacked me. Nobody called me ignorant. In fact, later that night, a friend pulled me aside and said, "I really respected that you didn't just talk for the sake of talking. I wish I had that kind of self-awareness." That moment was my wake-up call. I started asking myself, how many times have I done this? How much mental energy have I wasted forming opinions I don't need? How many arguments have I gotten into about things that ultimately don't matter to my life? How much anxiety have I carried trying to stay informed about everything? The answer was terrifying. Thousands of times, countless hours, immeasurable amounts of stress, and I realized I wasn't alone. We're all doing this. We're all carrying this crushing burden of feeling like we need to have informed, defensible positions on an infinite number of topics. But here's what the Stoics understood 2,000 years ago that we've forgotten. This is a form of voluntary suffering. The Stoic perspective. Let's travel back to ancient Rome for a moment. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world, had actual control over armies, laws, and the fate of millions. Yet even he, the Roman emperor, wrote in his private journal, "You always own the option of having no opinion. There is never any need to form an opinion about something where you lack adequate information or where it doesn't serve you. Think about that. The guy who literally ruled the known world was telling himself he didn't need opinions on everything. Meanwhile, we're scrolling Twitter thinking we need to weigh in on every trending topic. Seneca, another Stoic philosopher, put it even more bluntly. To be everywhere is to be nowhere. When we spread our attention across 1,000 different issues, trying to form positions on all of them, we end up with shallow understanding and deep exhaustion. We're nowhere, really understanding nothing. And Epictetus, who went from slave to one of history's most influential philosophers, taught, it's impossible for a person to learn what they think they already know. When we rush to form opinions, when we jump to conclusions before we have adequate information, we close ourselves off from genuine understanding. We stop learning because we've already decided what we think. The Stoics weren't advocating for ignorance or apathy. They were advocating for something much more radical: intentionality. They believed in conserving your mental energy for what truly matters, for what's within your control, for what aligns with your values and serves your growth. Here's the profound insight. Your mind is not an infinite resource. Your attention is limited. Your mental energy is finite. Every opinion you form, every position you defend, every argument you engage in, they all draw from the same limited pool of cognitive resources. So the question becomes, where do you want to invest that precious mental energy? In having surface-level takes on 1,000 things? Or in developing deep understanding of the few things that actually matter to your life? The hidden costs. Let's talk about what this opinion addiction is actually costing you. Because trust me, the price is much higher than you think. Cost number 1, mental exhaustion. Having endless opinions is genuinely exhausting. Think about it. Every opinion requires maintenance. You need to stay informed about developments. You need to defend your position when challenged. You need to update your stance as new information emerges. You need to reconcile contradictions. You need to deal with the cognitive dissonance when your opinions conflict. Multiply this by the hundreds of issues you've formed opinions about, and suddenly you understand why you feel mentally drained all the time. You're not just living your life. You're maintaining an entire mental warehouse of positions on topics ranging from international trade policy to whether that celebrity should have been cancelled. I recently did an exercise where I listed every topic I had a strong opinion about. The list was over 200 items long. Then I asked myself, how many of these opinions actually improve my life or anyone else's life? How many of these lead to meaningful action? How many of these are within my sphere of influence? The answer was devastating, maybe 5%. I was using 95% of my opinion-forming energy on things that served no purpose except to give me something to say in conversations or arguments online. Cost number 2, identity imprisonment. Here's something insidious that happens. Once we publicly declare an opinion, it becomes part of our identity. We've announced to the world, this is what I believe, and now we're trapped. Changing our mind feels like admitting we were wrong, which feels like a personal failure. So we defend positions we're not even sure about anymore. We dig in when presented with contradictory evidence. We become more concerned with consistency than with truth. We'd rather be wrong and stubborn than right and flexible. I've watched people defend opinions they formed years ago based on outdated information, simply because admitting they'd changed their mind felt too vulnerable. I've done it myself. We become prisoners of our past declarations. The Stoics would call this a violation of wisdom. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane." Sometimes the insane thing is clinging to an opinion just because you once believed it. Cost number 3. Relationship damage. How many relationships have been strained or destroyed over opinions about things neither person can control? How many family dinners ruined? How many friendships damaged? How many arguments with strangers online that left you angry and unsettled for hours? Here's what's tragic. Most of these conflicts are completely unnecessary. Two people who care about each other, who have shared history and love, damaging their relationship over different opinions about a politician's tweet, or a policy that neither of them has any power to influence, or some controversy involving people they'll never meet. I have a friend who hasn't spoken to his brother in 2 years because of a political argument. Not because either of them did something to hurt the other. Not because of any actual betrayal or harm. But because they had different opinions about issues happening thousands of miles away. And they both decided their opinion was more important than their relationship. The Stoics would call this tragedy. Epictetus taught, "Keep in mind that it's not the person who insults you or hits you who insults you, but your judgment that these things are insulting." The same applies here. It's not the different opinion that damages the relationship. It's our judgment that having the right opinion is more important than the relationship itself. Cost number 4. Diluted focus. This might be the most devastating cost of all. When you spread your attention across hundreds of opinions, you can't focus deeply on anything. You become a mental jack of all trades and master of none. Think about the issues that truly matter to you. The ones where you could actually make a difference. Your family, your work, your community, your personal growth, your craft or calling. These are the areas where deep thought, careful consideration, and sustained attention could actually transform your life or help others. But you can't give them that attention because your mind is cluttered with opinions about everything else. You're too busy following the news cycle, keeping up with controversies, maintaining your positions on 1,000 different topics. It's like trying to become a master chef while simultaneously trying to become a concert pianist, a professional athlete, a particle physicist, and a Supreme Court justice. You can't. You have to choose. You have to focus. The liberation. Now let me tell you about the other side. About what happens when you start letting go of unnecessary opinions. About 6 months after that dinner conversation, I decided to conduct an experiment. I was going to practice radical opinion minimalism. I made a list of the 5 to 10 topics that truly mattered to me. Areas where I had genuine expertise, deep interest, real influence, or meaningful stakes. Everything else, I was going to practice saying I don't know, or I haven't formed an opinion on that. The first week was uncomfortable. Really uncomfortable. When friends brought up current events, and I said, I haven't looked into that enough to have a perspective, I felt like I was disappointing them somehow. Like I was being a bad citizen or a boring conversationalist. But something interesting started happening. People actually respected it. They found it refreshing. In a world where everyone has a hot take on everything, genuine intellectual humility stood out. Even more interesting. Conversations got better. Instead of everyone just waiting for their turn to share their opinion, people actually started listening to each other. When you're not trying to prove you're informed about everything, you can be genuinely curious about what others think. You can ask questions. You can learn. I discovered that I don't know enough about that. Tell me what you think is one of the most powerful conversational tools you can deploy. It builds connection. It shows respect. It creates space for real dialogue instead of competing monologues. But the most profound changes were internal. Mental spaciousness. First, I suddenly had so much more mental space. It's hard to describe unless you've experienced it, but imagine you've been carrying a backpack full of rocks for so long you forgot it was there. And then someone says, "Hey, you can put that down." That's what it felt like. I wasn't constantly consuming news to maintain my opinions. I wasn't getting into arguments online. I wasn't feeling anxious about the 1,000 things happening in the world that I should care about. My mind felt quieter, calmer, more spacious, deeper understanding. Second, by focusing on fewer topics, I actually started understanding them more deeply. Instead of having surface-level knowledge about 100 issues, I developed genuine expertise in the handful that truly mattered to me. I could read books, not just articles. I could listen to long-form conversations, not just sound bites. I could sit with complexity and nuance instead of rushing to judgment. I could actually form opinions worth having, ones based on real knowledge and careful thought. Reduced anxiety. Third, my background anxiety level dropped significantly. I hadn't realized how much stress I was carrying from trying to keep up with everything. Every news alert was a potential obligation to form an opinion, to take a stance, to figure out where I stood. When I released that obligation, it was like someone turned down the volume on a noise I didn't know was there. I could focus on what was actually in front of me, my work, my relationships, my growth, without the constant static of the news cycle demanding my attention and opinion. Intellectual honesty. Fourth, I became more intellectually honest. When you're not performing your opinions for others, when you're not using them as social signals or identity markers, you can actually think about what you truly believe. You can follow your genuine curiosity instead of tribal allegiances. You can change your mind when presented with new evidence because you're not defending your ego. This is what Socrates meant when he said, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." It's not false modesty. It's recognizing that real understanding requires admitting the vastness of what you don't know. The practical framework. All right, so how do you actually do this? How do you break free from the opinion treadmill? Here's the practical framework I've developed, drawing from Stoic principles and modern psychology. Filter number 1, the control test. Before forming an opinion on something, ask, do I have any control or influence over this outcome? If the answer is no, if you can't affect the situation through your actions, your vote, your advocacy, or your choices, then having a strong opinion is optional at best and self-torturing at worst. This doesn't mean you can't care about things beyond your control. But there's a difference between compassion and opinion forming. You can care about people suffering in a distant conflict without needing to have detailed opinions about the geopolitical solutions. You can hope for good outcomes without forming positions you defend in arguments. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. Apply this to your opinion forming. Focus on what you can actually influence. Filter number 2, the relevance test. Ask, does this issue directly affect my life, my family, my community, or my core values? If you're a parent, you might form strong opinions about education policy. If you're a small business owner, you might develop informed positions on tax law. If you work in healthcare, you'll naturally have perspectives on medical policy. These opinions make sense. They're relevant to your lived experience. But do you need an opinion about a celebrity's personal life? A corporate merger in an industry you don't work in? A controversy at a university you don't attend? A debate in a field you have no expertise in? Probably not, and that's okay. It doesn't make you ignorant or uncaring. It makes you selective and intentional. Filter number 3, the information test. Ask, do I have adequate information to form a responsible opinion on this? This is where we often fail. We form strong opinions based on headlines, tweets, or short videos without understanding the full context, the history, the competing evidence, the expert consensus, or the nuances of the situation. The Stoics were obsessed with distinguishing between opinion and knowledge. Epictetus taught his students to constantly examine their beliefs and ask, is this actually true? Or is this just something I've assumed or been told? Before forming an opinion, Consider: have I read deeply on this topic? Have I sought out multiple perspectives, including those I'm inclined to disagree with? Do I understand the counter-arguments? Have I given this topic the serious thought it deserves? If the answer to these questions is no, then the most honest thing you can say is, I don't have an informed opinion on this yet. Filter number 4, the contribution test. Ask: will my opinion contribute something valuable, or am I just adding to the noise? Sometimes the most helpful thing you can do is listen instead of speaking. Sometimes the conversation doesn't need another voice. It needs thoughtful silence and careful consideration. Before sharing your opinion, especially publicly, ask: what am I adding here? Is this bringing new information, perspective, or understanding? Or am I just performing my tribal affiliation, signaling my values, or feeding my ego? Social media has created this illusion that every thought we have deserves an audience. But the Stoics understood that restraint is often more powerful than expression. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality. We also create more suffering through unnecessary opinion sharing than we realize." The 48-hour rule. Here's a practical tool. When a new controversy or issue emerges, wait 48 hours before forming any opinion about it. This simple practice will save you from so much unnecessary stress. Initial reports are often incomplete or inaccurate. The most outrageous take turns out to be missing crucial context. What seemed like a clear-cut issue reveals layers of complexity. I can't tell you how many times I've been grateful I waited before forming an opinion. Issues that seemed to demand immediate judgment turned out to be much more nuanced once the full story emerged. Controversies that dominated the news cycle for 24 hours were completely forgotten within a week. The 48-hour rule gives you perspective. It separates the truly important from the merely urgent or sensational. It protects you from being manipulated by algorithms designed to provoke immediate emotional reactions. The opinion audit. Once a month, conduct an opinion audit. List the issues you've spent mental energy thinking about. For each one, honestly assess: did having this opinion improve my life or anyone else's life? Did it lead to any meaningful action or positive change? Did it deepen my understanding or just give me something to argue about? Was this a good use of my limited mental resources? This exercise is humbling. You'll likely find that most of your opinion-forming energy went to things that serve no real purpose. But that awareness is the first step to change. Practice the power phrases. Get comfortable with these responses. I haven't looked into that enough to have a meaningful perspective. That's not something I've chosen to focus on. I don't have adequate information to form a responsible opinion on that. I'm still learning about this issue. I don't know. These phrases aren't admissions of ignorance. They're demonstrations of wisdom. They show intellectual humility, self-awareness, and the confidence to not perform knowledge you don't have. Practice them until they feel natural. Notice how people respond. Most of the time, they'll respect your honesty more than they would have respected a half-formed opinion delivered with false confidence. The deeper transformation. Now, I want to go deeper, because this isn't just about having fewer opinions. It's about fundamentally transforming your relationship with information, identity, and what it means to be engaged with the world. From consumption to contribution. When you stop trying to form opinions on everything, you shift from being a consumer of information to a contributor of value. Instead of passively absorbing news and controversies and forming takes, you start asking, where can I actually make a difference? Maybe that's in your local community, where you can volunteer, organize, or support. Maybe it's in your profession, where you can develop real expertise and solve actual problems. Maybe it's in your relationships, where you can be fully present instead of mentally distracted by the news cycle. Maybe it's in your creative work, where you can contribute something meaningful to the world. The Stoics believed in focusing on your sphere of influence, the arena where your actions matter. Epictetus taught, make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. Having fewer opinions frees you to focus on what's in your power. From identity to inquiry. One of the most liberating aspects of opinion minimalism is how it transforms your sense of identity. We often use opinions as identity markers. I'm the person who believes X, or I'm on the side that stands for Y, but this is a trap. When your identity is built on opinions, you become rigid. You can't grow, can't change, can't learn without feeling like you're betraying yourself. When you release unnecessary opinions, you can build your identity on something more stable. Your values, your character, your actions. You become the person who is curious, thoughtful, humble, and focused on contribution, rather than the person who has the right take on everything. This shift, from identity based on opinions to identity based on values, is incredibly freeing. Your values are stable: kindness, integrity, growth, courage. But your opinions can and should evolve as you learn more. From reaction to response, the modern information environment is designed to provoke immediate reactions. Algorithms favor content that generates quick emotional responses: outrage, fear, anger, tribal allegiance. When you're addicted to having opinions on everything, you're constantly in reaction mode. Something happens, and you immediately form a position, often based on incomplete information and heightened emotion. Opinion minimalism trains you to respond instead of react. There's a crucial difference. Reaction is immediate, emotional, and often regrettable. Response is thoughtful, measured, and chosen. Viktor Frankl, who survived Nazi concentration camps, wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." By not feeling obligated to immediately form opinions on everything, you create that space. You give yourself room to think, to gather information, to consider multiple perspectives. You respond from wisdom rather than reacting from emotion. The life-changing implications. Let me tell you about what happened when I really committed to this practice. The changes went far beyond just feeling less stressed. Relationships deepened. When I stopped viewing conversations as opportunities to share my opinions and started viewing them as opportunities to understand others, my relationships transformed. I became a better listener. I asked more questions. I got genuinely curious about what people thought, instead of just waiting for my turn to talk. My wife noticed the difference. "You're actually hearing me now," she said one night. She was right. I had been so caught up in my own opinions and thoughts that I wasn't fully present with the people I loved most. When you're not defending your opinions or formulating your response while someone else is talking, you can actually listen. And when people feel truly heard, relationships deepen in remarkable ways. Work improved. At work, I stopped feeling the need to weigh in on every discussion or have an opinion about every decision outside my area of expertise. This had a surprising effect. People started taking my opinions more seriously when I did share them. When you share fewer opinions, each one carries more weight. People know that when you speak up, you've actually thought deeply about it. Your signal-to-noise ratio improves dramatically. Plus, by not spreading myself thin, trying to have informed positions on everything happening in the company, I could focus on truly excelling in my actual role. The results spoke for themselves. Learning accelerated. This might sound counterintuitive, but I learned more by having fewer opinions. When you've already decided what you think about everything, you're not really learning. You're just confirming your existing beliefs. But when you approach topics with genuine curiosity and intellectual humility, when you're comfortable saying, "I don't know," you create space for real learning. You listen to understand rather than to refute. You seek out perspectives different from your own out of curiosity rather than to find flaws in them. I started reading more deeply, listening to longer form content, taking courses, having conversations with experts, not to collect opinions, but to genuinely understand. The difference is profound. Peace of mind. The biggest change was internal. I felt more peaceful than I had in years. The constant mental chatter, the need to stay informed, to have takes, to defend positions, quieted down. I could read the news without it ruining my day. I could see controversial topics trend on social media without feeling obligated to dive in. I could have conversations about difficult topics without my blood pressure rising. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This practice was the embodiment of that wisdom. I couldn't control what happened in the world, but I could control whether I let it colonize my mind with unnecessary opinions. The bigger picture. Let's zoom out for a moment and look at the bigger picture. Why does this matter? Why is this philosophy from 2,000 years ago so crucial right now? We're living through what I call the age of mandatory opinions. Social media, 24/7 news cycles, and our interconnected world have created an environment where we're expected to have informed, defensible positions on literally everything happening anywhere. But here's the paradox. Having opinions on everything makes you less informed, not more. It makes you less engaged with what truly matters, not more. It makes you less effective as a citizen, friend, family member, and person, not more. The Stoics understood something profound. You can't care about everything. Your capacity for genuine concern and effective action is limited. When you try to care about everything, you end up caring deeply about nothing. So you have to choose. You have to decide what deserves your mental and emotional energy. You have to practice what I call strategic apathy. Deliberately not caring about most things, so you can care more deeply about the few things that truly matter. This isn't about being disconnected or uninformed. It's about being intentionally connected and strategically informed. It's about recognizing that your attention is your most valuable resource and guarding it accordingly. Seneca put it perfectly. It's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. The same is true of our mental energy. It's not that we don't have enough cognitive resources. It's that we waste them on opinions that serve no purpose. The challenge. So here's my challenge to you. For the next week, practice radical opinion minimalism. When someone asks what you think about something in the news, resist the urge to immediately share your take. Instead, ask them what they think. Get curious. Listen. When you feel the pull to form an opinion about something, pause and run it through the 4 filters: control, relevance, information, contribution. If it doesn't pass all 4, consciously choose not to form an opinion. Practice these power phrases. I don't know enough about that to have a meaningful perspective. That's not something I've chosen to focus on. I'm still learning about this. Notice what happens. Notice how you feel. Notice how conversations change. Notice where you direct your newly freed mental energy. And here's the thing. This isn't easy at first. We're addicted to having opinions. We use them to signal our intelligence, our values, our tribal affiliations. We use them to feel engaged and informed. We use them to fill silence in conversations. Letting go of that feels vulnerable. It feels like admitting ignorance. It feels like being less than. But I promise you, on the other side of that discomfort is a kind of freedom you may have forgotten existed. the freedom to be genuinely curious instead of defensively certain, the freedom to learn instead of performing knowledge, the freedom to focus deeply on what matters instead of spreading yourself thin across everything. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the ancient world, spent his evenings writing in his journal, reminding himself of these same principles. He wrote, "Confine yourself to the present. Not to be ignorant of the past or unconcerned about the future, but to be fully present with what's actually in front of you, what you can actually influence." Most of what we form opinions about is neither present nor within our control. It's distant, abstract, beyond our influence. And forming opinions about it doesn't make us better citizens. It makes us exhausted, anxious, and distracted from where we could actually make a difference. So let me leave you with this. You don't need to have an opinion on everything. In fact, having fewer opinions is one of the most powerful choices you can make. It's not about being uninformed or apathetic. It's about being selective, intentional, and focused on what truly matters. Your mental energy is precious. Your attention is finite. Your life is happening right now, in your relationships, your work, your community, your growth. Don't let the illusion that you need to have opinions on everything steal your focus from what's actually in front of you. As Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. The same is true for information. It's not what's happening in the world, but what you choose to engage with, to form opinions about, to let occupy your mind. Choose wisely, choose less, choose what matters. Your mind will thank you. Your relationships will thank you. And you might just find a peace and clarity you didn't know was possible. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go put my phone down, ignore the news cycle, and be fully present with what's actually in front of me. I recommend you do the same. Remember, you always own the option of having no opinion. Use it liberally. Thanks for watching. If this resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And leave a comment telling me, what's one opinion you're going to let go of this week? See you in the next video.